Hello everyone, my name is StrangeFate, and I'd like to welcome you all to my first ever Top 10 Most Wanted Death Battles of 2021. I'm sure some of you are wondering why I'm doing this in the middle of Season 8, and the answer is... I've been busy for the most part. However, that doesn't matter because there are some ground rules I'd like to establish before we get started. First, no rematches. There are so many death battles that I want rematches for that if I were to allow them on this list, it might just be rematches only, so I'll just save them for another video. Though returning combatants are allowed. Rule 2. Confirmed fights or combatants are not included. That means that out of Dio vs Alucard, Galactus vs Unicron, Ruby vs Maka, Cole vs Alex, and the matches for Mikasa, Doctor Doom, Steven Universe, and Cloud Strife, none are on this list. 3. This is my opinion, and you're free to disagree, but do so respectfully. Finally, while I like to think of myself as being skilled in versus debating, I'm far from perfect, so don't expect me to get every verdict right. Anyways, with my rambling out of the way, let's get this list started. Number 10. Season 2 of Death Battle is littered with episodes that are incorrect. Yang vs Tifa, Guts vs Nightmare, Ryu vs Scorpion, and plenty more. However, most episodes were still pretty solid in my opinion, with one exception. I'm a firm believer that, given Gaara vs Toph is inaccurate and a bad episode, both deserve to return. But while Gaara could be interesting, we're talking Toph today, so let's look at who she'll be fighting. Toph vs Terra, Avatar vs DC. This is easily the best option for both, no questions asked. Crocodile is weak connections-wise and is a huge stomp. Tremor from Mortal Kombat is certainly more fair than Crocodile, but still lacks any good connections. Daredevil is actually interesting and I probably wouldn't mind that happening, but I think I still prefer Terra. Yes, I'm aware that the connections mostly boil down to teen girls that manipulate the Earth, but I still think this would be a good episode, and Terra doesn't have much better, nor does Toph. Just gonna say this right now as well, I'm gonna ignore stats from the comics for both, so that way it's a lot more fair, because with the comics Terra is leagues higher, meaning only cartoon feats are allowed in this case. Toph is, by her own statements, the greatest earthbender of all time. And while this is debatable, she's certainly up there. Her earthbending style is certainly more unique than most as she focuses mostly on flat-out earthbending rather than incorporating it into actual fighting. She can basically hurl rocks, create earthquakes, and anything else that involves manipulating the earth. This also apparently includes manipulating metal like Magneto, because, and this is what the show says, not me, metal derives from the earth, which I guess kind of makes sense? She's so skilled with it that she can make a suit of armor out of it, which probably makes her hit even harder. Also, while she is blind, this isn't really a hindrance in the slightest. Just like most blind people in fiction, she has her other senses drastically increased, and she can in fact see. Well, kind of at least. She can use a technique called the seismic sense, which lets her sense anything connected to the ground. Not only does it let her sense people and attacks, but it means she's also a living lie detector, as she can sense a change in someone's breath and heartbeat. This doesn't mean Terra can't keep up, though. Terra has access to geokinesis, which allows her to manipulate any earthly substance with ease. She can obviously do things like create earthquakes and throw rocks, but she can also sharpen rocks to be, well, as sharp as a sword. Not only that, but she can also sort of fly. To be more specific, she can rip rocks from the ground and just make them float. Somehow. You'd think she wouldn't be able to create earthquakes and whatnot if she isn't connected to the ground, but she still can. Why? Because she's a DC character, which makes her exempt from having to make any sort of sense whatsoever. I might as well also bring up that she has wielded a Black Lantern ring before, more specifically during the Blackest Night comics. This isn't exactly something that should be used, though, as she's only had it during that one time, and I really only brought this up because it's a neat little fact. With all that laid out, Now seems like a good time to look at one of the most interesting parts of this matchup, the stats. As I already said, I'm only going to use stats from Avatar: The Last Airbender and the original Teen Titans. Feats from The Legend of Korra, Young Justice, Judas Contract, or any comics that they've been in will not be included. Sorry, Gumball, but I won't be giving Terra the bullshit that is Outerversal Teen Titans Go. Back on track now. Ever since Gaara vs. Toph, we've gotten 2 more Avatar death battles in Aang vs. Edward Elric, and Zuko vs. Shoto Todoroki. Despite what you might think though, I won't just be restating the exact same stats from those, as Aang vs. Ed has some stats that have been surpassed by other more recent finds, and Zuko vs. Todoroki just flat out refused to give any stats other than a flame temperature comparison. On the note of surpassed stats, in Aang vs. Ed, they calced Aang creating a huge circular crater around the city of Yudao, and determined it to be around 160 kilotons of TNT. Despite Aang being in the Avatar state when doing this, it was a massive lowball, which they likely did to make it seem like Ed stood a chance. Something they tend to do a lot, but we all know Aang stomps. Recently, and by that I mean in December, a new calc was found for a flashback where the Avatar Roku created a massive trench around a volcano. I didn't do the calc, so I can't go into the specifics of it, but for anyone who wants the proof of it, I'll put the calc on screen for a minute. Also, credit for the calc goes to Phantom Falcon, because he's much better at that shit than I am. To get to the point though, the overall yield of this was determined to be around 1.5 megatons of TNT, though since it took 2 attacks, it really only clocks in at around 750 kilotons of TNT or large town level. That's about 4.5 times greater than what Death Battle gave Aang, and surprisingly, Toph scales to this, as do Zuko, Katara, Azula, and Aang. As impressive as that is though, Terra can more than match it. In fact, she can easily surpass it. For Terra, let's take a trip back to the second episode of Death Battle, Season 5, Raven vs. Twilight Sparkle. One of the main feats they gave Raven in this episode was when she helped Terra lift the Teen Titans Tower and the island it was on. Using this was admittedly a bit tricky, as they calced the energy output to be around 14 million megawatts per hour. Emphasis on the megawatts per hour part. Thankfully the internet exists, and after using a few converters, I was able to find it to be about 12 megatons of TNT. They also specified that because Terra was struggling before Raven stepped in to help, that Raven likely lifted more than half the weight. So for simplicity, let's just say that Terra lifted about 1/4 the weight, or about 3 megatons of TNT. This would actually make them relatively close in strength, with Terra only being about 4 times stronger. Speed, though, is an entirely different story. Avatar is relatively simple, as numerous characters have lightning timing feats. So, to be generous to Toph, I'm just going to put her at the average speed of lightning, putting her at about 285 times the speed of sound. Impressive as this is, though, Terra can do much better. Mostly through scaling to the likes of Beast Boy and Raven again, who have both displayed relativistic reactions, mostly through constantly reacting to attacks from Dr. Light. Even if we put Terra at the lowest end of relativistic speeds, she would still be able to react around 87,000 times the speed of sound. This puts Terra over 300 times faster than Toph, which basically spells it out that Terra wins. Not only can Terra negate the seismic sense thanks to floating in the air, but even without doing that she still wins, as she could casually react to all of Toph's attacks and eventually overwhelm her, as she can control everything from the earth while Toph is heavily limited in what she controls. It could be argued a semi-tough fight for Terra to win, but Toph just falls short in strength, speed, and control over the earth, allowing Terra the victory. However, let's take a step away from reality for the next entry, and move on to a fight focused on gaming. Kind of. You'll see. Number 9. I don't think anyone would be surprised if I said that Sword Art Online is the most hated, or I guess second most hated anime currently, with the only one that might beat it out being Boku no Pico, but I don't feel comfortable even talking about that one. Back to Sword Art Online, while it is admittedly a weak anime in my opinion, I still think it gets more hate than it deserves. Maybe if it were to appear in Death Battle, it would have a less negative reputation. Yeah or no. We all know that won't change anything, but I still would like to see it in Death Battle, and who better to appear first than the main protagonist Kirito? Now let's see who he should fight. Neo vs. Kirito, The Matrix vs. Sword Art Online. Look, I said it was a fight focused on gaming, not a fight featuring a video game character. Looking at Kirito's other three most popular matchups anyway, all of them feature video game characters but have their own issues. Mega Man.exe often feels weird to me. It has its connections, but I feel like the only reason people like it is because EXE stomps the living shit out of Kirito without even trying. Lloyd Irving really doesn't have connections with Kirito other than dual swords. Talk about riveting connections, am I right? And then there's Hyde from Undernight Inbirth, which is probably the most interesting one I've heard of as it's sparked a lot of popularity recently. Originally I couldn't figure out what the connections were, but from what I've heard, the connections are something along the lines of swordsmen from video game worlds who are both fighting to survive in said worlds. But I just find Neo to be much more fun in terms of thematics. Both are nerds in their own real worlds, but are considered the best fighters in their respective virtual worlds. Both are more or less the chosen saviors of their virtual worlds, and eventually free everyone from a world ruled by someone who could be seen as a god, Ancient Smith for Neo, and Akihiko Kayaba for Kirito. I could probably go further, but I think you guys get the point already, so let's look at the characters themselves. Neo was originally one of the many blue pills in the Matrix. He primarily was a programmer for Metacortex, though he also spent a lot of time as a professional hacker until he was freed from the Matrix, and from there he set on a journey to save humanity in both the Matrix and the real world. That sounds like a daunting task, which it certainly is, but Neo actually has quite the impressive arsenal. His most commonly used ability is telekinesis, but he can do far more than what you might think with it. Yes, obviously he uses it to throw shit at people, because anyone with telekinesis is legally required to do that, but he's also used this ability to stop bullets and even allow himself to fly, and pretty damn fast at that. He's outsped explosions and moved fast enough to create a sonic boom, but he can do much better than that. In The Matrix Reloaded, he flew to Morpheus, who was about 500 miles away, in just 15 minutes. This would put Neo's flight at about 2 to 3 times the speed of sound, but that's just how fast he can fly. If we want, we can get his attack speed far higher than that through a battle with Agent Smith. In this fight, they were both able to punch so fast that the lightning in the background is shown being slow in comparison. Highballing this, Neo would likely be punching just over 1,300 times the speed of sound. You'll understand why I highballed this when we talk about Kirito. Back to Neo though. Using this speed, it's likely he was striking with a force of nearly 900 gigatons of TNT, which puts him at large island level. Again, highball, but again, you'll understand when I talk about Kirito. We got off track though from talking about Neo's abilities, so let's return to that. He can pass through walls and revive the dead, though it's unlikely he could revive himself. He also has some limited form of precognition, though we don't know the extent of it other than it being described as seeing the world without time, whatever the fuck that means. He's not just limited to supernatural abilities though. He's skilled in numerous martial arts, including Kung Fu, Kenpo, Jiu-Jitsu, Karate, Eskrima, Drunken Boxing, and Taekwondo. He's also skilled with just about every firearm, but you could probably tell that just by looking at just about any PNG image of him. Well, time to talk about Kirito now, which I've been dreading. Not because of my opinions on Sword Art Online, but because Kirito and Sword Art Online are both complicated as shit. To clear things up first, I'm going to be operating under the assumption that Star King is standard, and any abilities he will be allowed unless they contradict other abilities. Well, let's start out with equipment. He has 2 rings that help with stats. The Ring of Brawn increases his strength slightly, and the Sigil of Liusula? I think that's how it's pronounced? slightly increases his agility. He has the Elucidator, which is his primary weapon and is a one-handed sword. He has a throwing blade and the Holy Blade Excalibur, both of which are secondary weapons. The Kagemitsu G4 is basically a lightsaber, but it can only be used for so long because it runs out of battery or can just overheat. For range, he has an FN-57 pistol, which can fire up to 20 rounds. That's all of his weapons, but we still have to go over his skills. And to avoid being here for over an hour, I'm just gonna go over the most notable ones. First are his skills in Sword Art Online. Of those, he has Sharp Nail, which is a 3-hit strike, a Spinning Shield, where he spins his sword fast enough to create a shield of light that can block fire and ice, but not poison or electricity, and the Vorpal Strike, which is a standard, absurdly powerful attack, but leaves the user open after. Meteor Fall is a two-hit attack in which the user throws their sword up, punches the opponent, catches the sword, and slashes in a straight line. Meteor Break is a 7-strike attack. Starburst Scream is a dual sword attack where the user cuts in 2 diagonal paths to create an X, and Arms Blow involves destroying a weapon by striking its weak spot. Think that was a lot? We're still not done. Next are the skills he gained in the worst arc of the show, Alfheim Online. Howling Octave is an 8-strike attack. Lightning Fall unleashes a surge of electricity upon impact, and that's really it. Most things he uses in that arc are basically just the same as Sword Art Online. Thankfully, Gun Gale Online only has 3 notable new skills. He can use the Kagemitsu G4 to block bullets with the uncreatively named Bullet Deflect, focus on determining target's movements with Distinguish, and use previously known skills with the Sword Skill Imitation. Thankfully, Project Alicization doesn't introduce any notable skills, so all that's left arsenal-wise is in-game stats. He has maxed out stats in One-Handed Sword, Dual Blades, Parry, Searching, and Hiding. He has near maxed out stats in Martial Arts, Blade Throwing, Battle Healing, Sprint, and Extended Weight Limit. Finally, he has decent stats in Fishing. Now for his actual stats. Remember how I said I would explain in the Kirito section why I highballed Neo's stats? Well, for the sake of fairness, I'll be lowballing Kirito's stats. You'll see why in a second. In terms of strength, Kirito was able to shake the entire underworld, which appears to be incredibly similar to Earth. Assuming this was comparable to an earthquake, the low end of this would be around 658 exatons of TNT, or over 600 million times stronger than Neo. And it's not likely speed is much better. Kirito is shown to be much faster than the Mecha Dragon, which could fly between planets in about 10 minutes. The low end of this is around the speed of light, which would make Kirito over 650 times faster than Neo. Yeah, I guess this really isn't the most fair fight in any way. Obviously, Kirito stomps Neo, but even if you ignore the stats, Neo doesn't really have a way to deal with Kirito's overwhelming arsenal, which is upsetting, honestly, because while I don't hate Sword Art Online at all, I love the first Matrix movie, so seeing Neo get his shit kicked in this badly is a bit heartbreaking. Even with how stompy it is, though, I still find myself absolutely loving the match due to the potential for things like animation, banter, and of course the fight track. But while I could go on about this match all day, I think I'm gonna move on to something a bit lighter, given how this one took a little bit out of me. Number 8. Overwatch is one of the most interesting franchises in versus debating. This is mostly due to no matter what matchup you do, it'll always be different. Obviously, there are the characters everyone wants in Death Battle, such as McCree, Genji, Sombra, Reaper, Doomfist, Winston, and kind of Zarya, Hanzo, and Junkrat. I say kind of because I've seen some requests for them, but not as much as the most popular characters. Surprisingly though, not many people care about seeing Diva get in, which is weird given that she's one of the most popular characters with a lot of fun potential. So let's see if we can find a suitable match somewhere for her. Diva vs. Penny Parker, Overwatch vs. Marvel. I've really never seen this one brought up or either, which is criminal given some of the matches I have seen for Diva. Imp from Plants vs. Zombies has never really made much sense to me. Only connection I can think of is fictional characters who pilot mechs, and it gives me an excuse to throw Gremlin Diva on screen, which is admittedly kind of funny. Futaba from Persona 5 has connections. Both are teenage girls obsessed with playing video games, fight in vehicles that they can fly in, being Necronomicon and Diva's Mecha, and their big finishing moves both involve bombs. But Futaba shit stomps so hard that it's actually kind of funny. Tronbon from Mega Man Legends is arguably the most popular matchup for Diva, to the point of even becoming a DBX, but it combines the lack of really good connections from Imp vs. Diva with the absolute shit stomp nature of Diva vs. Futaba. Penny, on the other hand, has pretty damn solid connections and is somewhat fair. Both Diva and Penny are teenage girls who pilot mechs, have bug and animal-related themes, and are obsessed with nerd or geek culture. Getting right into it, starting with Diva, she pilots a mecha which stands for something, though I don't remember what. These were built to be piloted by humans because despite South Korea initially resorting to drones to stop a giant omnic called the Guishin, it eventually adapted and began hacking into these drones. To counter this, South Korea began making piloted mech suits that can't be hacked, and this likely also applies to Diva's mech. Yes, I'm aware Sombra can hack Diva's mech in-game, but she can also hack McCree to prevent him from doing a fucking somersault, so I don't think Blizzard really gives a shit. Diva's mech also just so happens to have quite the arsenal, with 2 forms of firing thanks to plasma shotgun-like blasts and quick-moving homing micro-missiles. She can also block most projectiles with her defense matrix, though from what is shown in the animated short, it's likely she shoots down any projectiles. Granted, this isn't confirmed, but this is highly likely in my opinion. Also, while the mech might look like a slow hunk of metal, it can fly with 2 different showings of flight. In the cinematic shorts that Diva is in, we see her flying for an unlimited amount of time, while in-game she has a short duration of flight. I'll be going with what we've seen in the cinematics, as it better demonstrates what Diva is capable of, and the in-game limits are likely for game balance purposes. We're not even done with Diva yet though, as she also has a last resort for when her back is against the wall. See, Diva's mech is powered by a nuclear reactor which can be overloaded, and then force the mech to self-destruct in an incredibly powerful blast. How powerful? Well, remember the calc I showed Phantom Falcon had done for Avatar earlier? He also did a calc for Diva's mech exploding. I'll put it on screen right now for anyone who wants to look at it. Anyways, while the explosion gets 6 kilotons of TNT, and Diva did survive the explosion, she didn't take it point blank. Based on quick measurements that I've done, Diva likely tanked about 8% of the blast, which means she survived about 480 tons of TNT, something most Overwatch characters would probably scale to. After using this, Diva would be left vulnerable without her mech, but she does carry a light gun as protection, which can fire her bullets at incredible speed, or charge the entire magazine for a giant laser blast. Thanks for giving her that, Heroes of the Storm! However, we can't just talk about Diva all day, so let's show Penny some love as well. Wait, crap, that came out bad, and is worse because I'm pretty sure Penny is underage. Fucking goddammit! So, Penny also pilots a mech just like Diva. Unlike Diva, though, Penny's is much more creatively named than a mecha, as hers is called the SPDR. Get it? It's like the word spider. The name also holds some significance, as it also represents that Penny kind of isn't the only one controlling the mech, though she also is. What do I mean by this? Well, as we are all probably aware by now, all Spider-Men/women are granted their powers by being bitten by a radioactive spider, and Penny is no different, except she is. Unlike most Spideys, Penny didn't develop a superhuman physique, but instead gained a psychic link with the spider, allowing her to control the SPDR. As you probably guessed by now, the mech is the one with the wrist-mounted web shooters, not Penny herself. She also possesses the same abilities shared by Spideys, such as Spider Sense for pseudo-precognition, and the mech itself has superhuman stats as well as wall crawling. Its armor is heavily resistant to bullets and blasts, and can allow Penny to hack into nearly anything. It also has numerous weapons on its limbs, though the only one that's been shown is finger lasers. It also possesses quite possibly the deadliest tool in all of fiction, a snack dispenser. Okay, jokes aside, if you've been actually paying attention to the abilities I've listed, you might realize that their mechs are capable of actually countering each other's abilities. The SPDR's armor should be resistant to Diva's fusion cannons, micro missiles, light gun, and self-destruct. Keyword is resist. And I feel like Diva could probably damage the mech if given time, given how she counters the SPDR. Or that might be possible, at least. The boosters would allow Diva to keep up with Penny's wall crawling and swinging, especially notable as the mecha has been able to make sharp turns before. She could likely stop the finger lasers and webs with her defense matrix. The mech would be immune to Penny's hacking. And Diva actually holds an edge outside of mech battling due to actually carrying a weapon on her. This is where the stats come in, however. Right off the bat, I want to cover speed since we're talking about Overwatch. If you're unaware, Blizzard released the first Overwatch novel nearly a year ago, and it gave Overwatch a potential reaction speed through the picoseconds. Using this would put the entire cast at MFTL plus reactions, but I have my own issues with this. My big issue is that the only evidence of this is through a statement, and we haven't seen any proof in other media to support this. This doesn't mean Overwatch characters are slow, however, as they do still have an impressive speed through Soldier 76 reacting to this grenade. Based on the time frame and distance that was shown, it's likely that the speed feat comes out to Mach 180, and it's fair to assume Diva should scale to this. Penny, however, gets a hell of a lot faster than that by scaling to Peter, who has dodged light speed attacks, which, as I just said, that's far faster than Diva. On top of that, Diva can't even hurt Penny's mech. Remember how Diva's mech explosion could reach 6 kilotons of TNT? That's impressive, but Penny is a Marvel Street tier, which means that, just like all other Marvel Street tiers, she should scale to Luke Cage surviving an explosion. Yet again, credit to Phantom Falcon for calculating this explosion, which he got to come out to around 133 kilotons of TNT. That's 22 times greater than Diva's self-destruct, and I think that solidifies that Penny would win due to her superior speed and durability when both counter each other's abilities really well. But while we're on the topic of games, let's resume more complicated shit. Number 7. It's no surprise that there have been tons of fighting game reps in Death Battle. Not only are there fighting game rivalries like Street Fighter vs Mortal Kombat, but the concept is characters fighting, so naturally you have to use fighting game reps. But while we've seen a lot, one franchise that hasn't seen much time in Death Battle is BlazBlue. The last time we got a BlazBlue match was in Season 2, so I think it's time to bring it in again. But who could we choose? There are great options to use, like bringing back Ragna, or you could bring a new face in like Jin, Makoto, Terumi, Rachel, Hazama, Hakumin, Jubei. I could go on. But none of those pique my interest quite as much as MU12 herself, Noelle Vermillion. But who could be a good opponent for her? Well, everyone probably knows already, but let's find out anyway. Noelle vs. Aegis, BlazBlue vs. Persona. 2B stands no chance, as Noelle's far superior stats and overwhelming hacks would make short work of the lewd robot. Dizzy from Guilty Gear has kind of decent connections, I guess, and could actually hold her own for quite a while, given that Guilty Gear is one of the few franchises capable of keeping up with BlazBlue. However, it lacks the special connections of Noelle vs. Aegis, instead feeling like it tries to force another Ragna vs. Soul. Jenny Wakeman was kinda just there to fill space, as while the connections are meh, she really stands no chance against Noelle and would be better off fighting against Robot Boy. Noelle vs. Aegis actually has a lot in common, and I'm somewhat surprised it hasn't happened yet. Both are blonde-haired female women from absurdly powerful franchises, are equipped with numerous gun-like weapons, both are close friends with someone named Makoto. I could go on, but this is going to be really long anyway, so I'm just going to get right to the characters. Now, where do I begin with Noelle? No, really. Where the hell do I begin with a BlazBlue character, let alone Noelle Vermillion? First, I want to give an insane amount of credit to Psychic for his help with this. He understands BlazBlue far, far better than I could ever hope to. Link to his channel will be in the description below. Anyways, for Noelle, or MU12, or the 5-year-old with a shit ton of Rule 34, or that one character that locks you and keeps you in a corner in BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, whatever the fuck you want to call her, is one of the 3 replicas of Saya. You might remember her as Ragna's younger sister, which was brought up in Death Battle. Normally, I'd go into her whole backstory, but I'd honestly prefer not to spend 3 days talking about Noelle. To be brief, she was adopted by the Vermilion family, then her family lost aristocratic rights, she joined the military, and if I go any further than that mess, my head is gonna fucking explode. Anyways, Noelle's primary weapon is her arch-enemy event weapon, the Demon Gun's Berserk. The Demon Guns come in many forms, such as Fenrir, a multi-barrel machine gun, Freya is a shotgun, Thor is a recoilless rifle, Sleipnir is a machine gun, and Noelle's weapon, Berserk, is a pair of handguns, though there's much more to them than just that. It can fire out magic formula blasts, which come in numerous variants. Cancellation is unknown, though Ragna used it to remove a formula acting as a block, preventing him from going any further. Climate regulation essentially controls the weather. Restraint binds the target and can only be done by a code. Regeneration heals wounds. Camouflage can hide the user from sight, and also things like doors and stairs, although physical contact can detect them. Hardening tightens the skin to a point where it can't be damaged. Eclipse Barrier creates a space that is separated from the real world, and Mirror's Edge creates a clone of the target to fight against said target. Her martial art of choice is Gunkata, which incorporates heavy usage of firearms, and even more than that, they don't really fire projectiles, but instead they just kind of fire through space and time or some shit. Basically, she can hit you even if you're behind cover, with the only limit being she still has to aim. They're also something called a Nox Nictoris, I think it's pronounced, which means they deal lasting damage to the soul. Thanks to the eyes of the blue, Noelle can see the memories of anyone she makes physical contact with. Think that's a bit confusing? Hope not, because that's kind of tame compared to what comes next. See, Noelle is kind of immortal in a few ways. First is her life link with Hazama. In order to kill either of them, you'd have to kill both at the same time. Though this really only benefits Hazama, as Noelle is already immortal without it. Why? Basically, Noelle broke a giant time loop, which allowed her to inherit powers linked to God. Why? Because BlazBlue. Familiarize yourself with that phrase, because that probably won't be the last time you hear it. Her immortality is quite literally the definition of bullshit, as Hakumen has tried to use Time Killer on her, which is basically Hakai from Dragon Ball. As you've probably guessed, it didn't do jack shit to her. As for Fatal Blows, well, that's where things get complicated. It's not that Noelle can just shrug them off like they're nothing, but more like they just don't fucking happen at all. A good way to understand it is to compare her immortality to another BlazBlue character, Rachel Alucard. You can technically kill them, but it won't do anything. The universe simply won't acknowledge their deaths. Basically, Noelle will keep fighting until her opponent is defeated. Putting it in visuals would be pretty hard to do, so for another explanation example, let's look at Hazama again. One time, Hazama captured Rachel when she was weakened so he could experiment the limits of her immortality. Hazama flat out stated that he killed her several times with how much damage was being inflicted on her, but due to being an immortal, any death Rachel would have experienced didn't happen, and it just kept going. I hope you understood that, because I have to move on to other stuff regarding Noelle before this takes 5 hours. With Phenomena Intervention, Noelle can change her target's state from existing to no longer existing. Obviously that sounds OP, because it is. So you're probably wondering why Noelle hasn't tried to take over the world or some shit yet. And the answer is Simply put, she's extremely nice, often trying to show others compassion and all that type of stuff. Her alter ego MU-12 is the exact opposite, though, and likely could take over the world if she didn't just want to destroy it. MU has completely different abilities from Noelle. She can fly and hover, attack with disembodied swords from behind her, conjure an energy barrier, and create wormholes to attack through. She can also use a driver called Stein's Gunner, which places floating units across the arena. These units can fire energy beams, self-detonate, or ram into targets. She also has an overdrive called Stein's Geyser, which causes MU's swords to turn into beams of light. Wow, that was a lot of work. Well, now that we've gotten that complicated bullshit of BlazBlue done, let's talk Aegis. Now, when I bring up Aegis, most of you would probably think of the Aegis toaster meme, but there is so much more to her than just that. Aegis is an anti-shadow suppression weapon, created by the Kirito group to fight shadows. Eventually, she joins the Seas and proves to be a valuable asset to the group as she's frankly loaded with weapons. She has SMGs, missile launchers, miniguns, rifles, grenade launchers, and probably more. She has auto-targeting systems, scanning systems, enhanced endurance, and the ability to talk to animals somehow. She's also a pretty damn good alarm clock. Aegis' true uniqueness, though, is that she's the first character that isn't a blank-faced protagonist to be a wildcard. What's a wildcard? A wildcard is a Persona user capable of wielding multiple personas. For this analysis specifically, I'll be focusing on two. Her access to her original persona, Athena, and the one she gained from Makoto, Orpheus. Also, when I say Makoto, I'm referring to Makoto from Persona 3, not Makoto from Persona 5. Let's start with Athena. Athena can block all Pierce attacks, though she's weak to electricity. Moves-wise, Athena naturally comes equipped with Swift Strike, which deals 1 to 3 hits. Rakukaja can increase defense, Tarukaja increases attack, Dekunda negates stat decreases, Masukukaja increases accuracy and evasion, Diarahan fully restores health, and God's Hand deals severe strike damage to the target. As for Orpheus, it's weak to fire and electricity but has numerous abilities to use. Gurento is a dual strike and fire attack, Dekaja removes target stat buffs, Agidine is a heavy fire attack, Endure is a passive ability that lets the user survive a fatal blow with 1 HP, Fire Boost increases the power of fire attacks by 25%, Fool Card is a passive that strengthens all elemental attacks, Invigorate restores SP at the end of each turn, Megidolon is an incredibly powerful almighty attack, and Aeon Rain is a severe attack that hits anywhere from 3 to 10 times. On top of all that, Aegis can enter Orgia mode, which boosts her stats and removes negative statuses. Still not enough for you? She can take it a step further with EX Orgia Boost, which further boosts her stats and grants her regeneration, though these modes can cause her to overheat. Normally, I would take this time now to talk about stats, but Persona stats are complicated as shit. Normally, if I'm unable to nail down any solid stats on my own or with help from Discord, I look at either what Death Battle has done, or check for calcs done on Versus Battle Wiki, since that's quite literally the only thing accurate on that damn website. However, there are problems with both. First is using Death Battle. There has been one Persona Death Battle, Weiss vs Mitsuru, which had calcs. To make the fight fair though, they severely lowballed Mitsuru. How much? AP-wise, they have her at town level, speed-wise, she's Mach 1, and durability-wise, she's multi-city block. Yeah, that's not gonna cut it. As for Versus Battle Wiki, the day that I accept Persona being low complex multiversal with immeasurable speeds is the day that I accept Overwatch becoming MFTL+. To be quick in terms of levels, Persona is generally placed around universal to low multiversal with FTL speeds due to the Morningstar attack speeds getting nerfed. As for BlazBlue, physically they're planet and they have multiversal hacks with confusing speed that I don't want to get into, so let's just say that they're faster than Persona. A lot faster, probably. Granted, stats really don't matter, because if you remember anything from Noelle's rundown, while Aigis might potentially be able to subdue Noelle, she can't kill Noelle. Normally I'm not a huge fan of matches this one-sided, but this is an exception because both Noelle and Aigis are some of my favorite Blaze Blue and Persona characters, and neither really have any other good options. And man, I really went on longer than I expected to go with that one. Hopefully the next entry isn't too complicated to talk about. Number 6. Death Battle isn't really known for using obscure anime, which is obvious if you look at how many Dragon Ball and Naruto episodes there are. Sure, we get the occasional semi-obscure anime like Akame ga Kill, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Soul Eater, but many are still familiar with those. We've really only seen 2 anime on Death Battle that were obscure before being featured, which are Berserk and Elfen Lied. But why not bump it up to a 3rd? And for that one, I'd like to draw attention to Symphogear, more specifically its protagonist, Hibiki Tachibana. But who could someone as obscure as her fight? Well, let's find out. Hibiki Tachibana vs Issei Hyoru, Symphogear vs High School DxD. Sailor Moon is one that just popped into my head at random, but it doesn't really have much going for it. Not only does Moon have far better options, but the connections are mostly limited to teenage anime girls that transform, and at that rate, why not just do Moon vs Ryuko? It also really doesn't help that Moon obliterates Hibiki. Geostellar was more or less just a spot filler, as the only connection is that they both have some correlation with something called noise. Yang is interesting, as she technically got me into looking into Hibiki thanks to me reading a script for Yang vs Hibiki. However, and while it might work connections-wise, as both are blonde teens known for punching with rocket-powered gauntlets, increasing their strength by losing control, and might be lesbian, that last part's up in the air, it's still too much of a shitstomp. Even if Yang is slightly faster, the instant that Hibiki makes any physical contact, Yang just commits dead. Then there's Sumire Yoshizawa from Persona. Shout out to Jack of All Trades for introducing me to this one. From what I've seen, it's fairly thematic, but Jesus, Sumire shit stomps. Even with the nerfs that Persona's received, it's still super unfair, and I also just prefer other matchups for Sumire. So I guess that just leaves Issei. Both are teenagers capable of transforming into numerous similar transformations, both specialize in using gauntlets, both gained their powers after nearly dying through impalement, both initially joined a group in which their teammates didn't really like them at first but grew to be friends with them, and there's obviously more, but I think at this rate you guys can see why I like this, so let's just jump into this one. Hibiki first gained her Symphogear after a shard got stuck in her chest, and eventually she learned how to activate it. Most Symphogear users possess lances or swords or whatever, but Hibiki's had a defect, so she became the weapon herself by using rocket-powered gauntlets. She specializes in punching like the one JoJo's Bizarre Adventure meme that everyone points out all the time. And this makes sense actually, as that exact punching style was what was confirmed to be what inspired Hibiki's creator in the first place. She has numerous types of punches, such as her most prevalent attack, Testament. This is a flurry of rapid-fire punches, which is always finished off by hugging the target to dispel any evil. Have I brought up that this show is fucking weird yet? Because it is. She can also fire off punches that create spears, torrents of fires, shockwaves, energy beams, energy binds, and tornadoes. Hell, she can even punch through any attack with a move called Metatonia. She can form energy barriers, though her real bread and butter are her transformations. First is her X-Drive form, which not only enhances her physical stats, but also grants her unlimited flight, and she can boost said stats a bit further with Burning X-Drive, though Burning X-Drive requires specific conditions to be met. Amalgam is a unique form, as it grants 2 potential different forms, in Cocoon and Imago. Cocoon greatly enhances her durability at the cost of speed, while Imago enhances her speed and strength at the cost of durability. Ignite Module is arguably her best form, as it maxes out her stats and grants regeneration so absurd that she can regrow limbs in seconds. On the note of survival, I might as well go over the first calc of the list that I was forced to do on my own, so let's look at her durability. Beaky was tough enough to tank hits from Adam Weishaupt, I think that's how it's pronounced, after he absorbed all the energy from the Orion constellation. This is where it gets complicated, so buckle in. Before absorbing the constellation, Adam was seen as being dangerous by the Custodians, which are basically gods of the Symphogear universe. While we don't have a confirmed limit for the Custodians, they did consider Fine as being weak compared to them, so this should work as a good start for a lowball. Fine could match Hibiki's teammate Chris Yukin, who could outpower a beam capable of destroying the moon, which means overpowering about 20 quintillion tons of TNT. Let's say, for the sake of lowballing, that Adam is on par with that in his base form. The Orion constellation consists of about 114 stars. Once again, for the sake of making this easy, I'm going to assume that each star contains the same amount of energy, which is about 136 tenatons of TNT. Taking all of this into account, Hibiki can withstand attacks up to about 4 vigintillion tons of TNT. Just to clarify, that's 63 zeros. She can't quite match this in strength, but she did still manage to defeat an alkanoid that created an alternate dimension stated to be equivalent in size to our own solar system. This would require a kinetic energy of about 200 sextillion tons of TNT to create, or about 53 zeros. While I did say this is Hibiki's best form, that doesn't mean it's her only form that maxes out her stats, however. She also has a Berserker form, which grants the same benefits as the Ignite module, though what separates them is that in the Berserker form, she becomes bloodlusted, causing her to lose self-control and attack fairly predictably. As for Issei, he also uses a gauntlet referred to as a gear, more specifically the boosted gear. This takes the form of a red gauntlet on his right arm, which doubles his power and lets Issei fire his signature attack, a beam known as the Dragon Shot. And right off the bat, I'm just going to step into the weirder attacks quickly, because Issei has some perverted attacks, to say the least. With Dress Break, he can do a Thanos impression, but instead of snapping people away, he snaps away women's clothing. With Polingual, he can hear a woman's thoughts through her breast, somehow, or use the Neutron Beam Cannon, I hope I pronounced that right, where he absorbs the energy from a woman's breast and then fires it out as a blast of energy. God, and I thought Symphogear was weird. He does have more normal attacks, however, thankfully. He can breathe fire with the Flame Blaze, he can fly, and he has an immunity to holy attacks. The boosted gear's most useful asset, though, is its ability to grant Issei numerous transformations. First is Scale Mail. This form grants rocket boosters for a speed enhancement, as well as claws. The Juggernaut Drive grants him absurd stats and lets Issei fire a beam from his chest called the Longinus Smasher, I think? Though it comes at the cost of his sanity. Illegal Move Triana isn't an attack or an illegal move, but instead grants him 2 different forms with specific stat changes. First is Welsh Sonic Boom Knight, which drastically increases his speed to an absurd degree. Heavy emphasis on absurd. In his base form, Issei can blitz Volley, who can dodge light speed attacks. Given that the definition of blitzing is being at least 10 times faster, base Issei is likely around 10 times light speed. While there's no official speed increase known from the Welsh Sonic Boom Knight, it's probably safe to assume it makes him around 100 times faster than light speed. Should the situation call for durability and power instead of speed, though, he can cut his speed in half by activating Welsh Dragon Rook. He can also fire Dragon Blaster, which is a beam that warps space and time, but we still have more transformations to cover, so let's continue. Cardinal Crimson Red promotion doesn't just look badass, but is his most balanced form as it enhances all of his stats with no repercussions. The Diablos Dragon God form is the definition of all or nothing, as it grants immense power, but has some serious drawbacks. While it has the potential to last up to 3 minutes, significant use of it can result in the time limit being as little as 10 seconds. Also, it causes him so much pain that death would be tame in comparison. By far his best form, though, is the Apocalypse Answer Arms. This power, the form that he has, grants him so much power that he can destroy the Earth with ease. Thankfully, I don't have to calculate that because Ultron Sigma already did the work for me and determined that the energy needed to destroy a planet like Earth is around 53 sextillion tons of TNT. Thanks, Death Battle. Yeah, if you couldn't already tell by now, the stats are really fucking polarizing in this matchup. Initially, I had thought that Issei won because he's easily leagues faster than Hibiki. Hibiki has some supposed light speed attack dodging feats, but there are serious issues that make me doubt them, so let's go with a more consistent speed feat, dodging the return stroke from Fine's whip. The whip traveled from the moon to the Earth in about 4 seconds, which, given the distance of about 240,000 miles, Hibiki had to react around 282 times the speed of sound. As impressive as that is, Issei is still over 30,000 times faster than her. Given that Dress Break could remove her simple gear, which would leave her with the same physicality as a normal human, it seems like a win for Issei, but Hibiki still has one saving grace that actually gives her the win. Remember the Berserker form? It's not armor or anything, but rather just a form, meaning Dress Break wouldn't affect it. Given that Hibiki is over 3 nonillion times stronger than Issei, even speed wouldn't save him, as just one hit would destroy him. This ultimately is more than enough to get Hibiki the win, and that secures that. But we're not just done with obscure anime yet, or we kinda are, but you'll understand soon enough. Number 5. Death Battle isn't exactly all too fond of constantly bringing new franchises into the show left and right, which is definitely evident with Season 7, which, despite having 20 episodes, only used 7 new franchises. This is a shame too, as there are so many franchises that deserve to be in Death Battle but haven't yet, such as Banjo-Kazooie, Xenoblade Chronicles, Shantae, Fate, any Final Fantasy game that isn't 7, and plenty more that I haven't named. One that I'm particularly disappointed about not being featured in Death Battle, though, is Fire Emblem. It has this almost negative stigma surrounding it, which I don't understand. Like, sure, it has more reps in Smash than it needs, but is that really a justifiable reason to hate on a franchise as a whole? Probably not. But while Fire Emblem has plenty of characters that could be brought into Death Battle, the one I'd like to focus on today is arguably my favorite Fire Emblem character, the Radiant Hero Ike. But who could he fight in Death Battle? Well, let's find out. Ike vs. Guts, Fire Emblem vs. Berserk. This is much more thematic than people give it credit for. Magnus from Kid Icarus really doesn't have anything in common other than giant swords. Cloud is similar, though at least he adds the additional connection of JRPG protagonist. Siegfried from Soul Calibur is easily the most popular request for Ike, and to be fair, it is relatively thematic. However, I just feel like Ike vs. Guts has everything good that Siegfried vs. Ike would have, and plenty more to make it an even better episode. Obviously, both are badass swordsmen known for wielding giant swords capable of slaying inhuman creatures, as Ragnar can slay goddesses and Dragon Slayer kills whatever the fuck Guts wants dead. But there's far more than that. Both seek revenge on someone that killed people they cared about, the Black Knight and Griffith, but the first time they had an easy chance to kill them, they decided to make the mistake of showing mercy. Both also joined a group of mercenaries while young, and despite lacking skill and being mocked for it, eventually rose to become the most skilled and respected leaders of said groups. Starting with Ike, he's the leader of a group known as the Grail Mercenaries, which are, well, a group of mercenaries, obviously. He took over the role of leader after witnessing his father's murder at the hands of the Black Knight, and really wanted revenge on the Black Knight. Luckily, he's able to get their revenge as he's a skilled fighter, made even better thanks to the sword he wields, Ragnar. I'll go into Ragnar more in a bit, but first I want to go through Ike's abilities. His most notable and commonly granted ability is Aether, which is one of the best abilities in Fire Emblem. It combines attributes from Adept, Soul, and Luna, meaning it's a 2-hit attack where the first hit heals HP equivalent to how much damage is dealt to the target, and the second hit decreases the target's defense by 50%. While bosses aren't typically affected by it, this wouldn't apply to opponents in death battle, as bosses negate it through the use of the Mantle skill, which non-Fire Emblem characters wouldn't have. Nihil is a rather simple to explain skill, but is easily one of the best abilities Ike could possess, as it prevents opponents from using any skill, which means that if it isn't a basic attack like a sword swing or some shit, it becomes unusable. Yes, this also applies to passive abilities, and I want you guys to keep that in mind, as it will be important to the results. Heavy Blade slightly decreases the user's speed, but in exchange grants a massive strength boost if they're stronger than the opponent. Swordbreaker increases the user's hit rate and evasion if fighting an enemy that uses a sword, which is basically all of Ike's opponents. Finally, Threatened Defense drastically decreases the defense of a target. There are other skills I did indeed purposely leave out, such as Ignis, Steady Breath, and Quick Riposte, but those are mostly just skills that are only usable with Fire Emblem's mechanics taken into account. On to Ragnall itself. It's a special sword that was created by the goddess Ashura to kill the other goddess Yuna. It's powerful enough to launch shockwaves on impact, and it grants a plus 5 defense to the wielder. Also, did I mention it's powerful? Because it's really powerful. How powerful? Well, Ashura blessed the sword to have power equal to her, as that was the only way to defeat Yuna, and Ashura once exerted enough energy to flood the entire planet. Thankfully, I don't have to calc this because that's already been done before, and it was calced to be around 25 petatons of TNT or multi-continental. Ike's also tough enough to withstand strikes from the lightning spell Rexbolt, which the kind people on Versus Battle Wiki have calced already to be nearly 1.5 megatons of TNT. But it's likely he could withstand attacks much higher, likely up to the multi-continental feat I listed, but he's never been seen getting hit by one. On the note of lightning attacks, while there are lightning speed defeats for Ike to scale to, it's possible to get him to scale to light speed via dodging the light-based spell Crazy Lad. However, for the sake of fairness, I'll be putting him at lightning timing against Guts. Speaking of Guts, you guys probably already know his whole story by now because Death Battle already did Guts vs. Nightmare, which is good because that means I can skip the morbid as hell backstory that I don't want to go into and instead just jump right into his abilities, so let's just do that. He wields the sword Dragon Slayer, which, looking at it, I can see why it's made for slaying dragons. The blade is absolutely massive and is probably is just used to compensate for something, but its size makes it quite efficient for more than just killing things. It can be used defensively for blocking projectiles such as arrows, mitigating damage by absorbing most of the blow, and even diverting lightning to the ground like a lightning rod, apparently. Also, it's killed so many people that it can now harm ghosts, which I don't understand, but given that Guts is able to swing that thing around as if it weighed nothing, I'm not even going to begin to try and question it. He has far more than just an oversized steak knife, though. His left hand can fire cannonballs, which he usually does at point-blank range, or he can use it to propel himself towards a target. He has a repeater crossbow, which basically means that when activated, it begins rapid-firing bolts at the target. He has throwing knives that he's incredibly accurate with, and mini-bombs because why not? His most impressive gear, however, is the Berserker armor. Obviously, it works fine as regular armor, but it goes so much further than that. When activated, it basically turns Guts into a feral beast, allowing him to unleash his full strength. Enough strength, in fact, to overpower Mazgus, who once vaporized a giant water creature, a feat which was calculated to be around 119 tons of TNT, or multi-city block. He's dodged lightning bolts with ease, but doesn't even need to do that as he can just tank them perfectly fine. While I couldn't find an exact calc for him tanking Ganishka's lightning, Ganishka himself did once create a giant storm, which was calculated to be over 550 megatons, or large mountain level. Keep in mind, this is a massive overestimation of Guts, as he was badly injured by weaker attacks from Ganishka, but I'm trying to be nice to Guts. The Berserker armor will also literally force Guts to keep fighting until every last drop of blood has been spilled, every bone in his body has been shattered to bits, and his flesh completely gone. It doesn't do this by healing him, but instead forcibly relocates joints, reinforces broken bones, and uses barbs to bind his flesh to his bones. While this sounds great and all, he'll still take damage anyway, but he just keeps on fighting regardless of that. Yeah, even with an overestimation of Guts to a massive degree for durability, he really doesn't stand a chance against Ike. While both are possibly even in speed depending on what you buy for Ike, Jesus Christ, that is all he has. In terms of strength, Ike is 2 trillion times stronger than Guts, which is 14 zeros, and even with the overestimation of Guts' durability, Ike would still be 45 million times tougher at his best. Really, the biggest hurdle for Ike to overcome would be outlasting the Berserker armor, but he doesn't actually have to worry about that. Remember how I said Nihil would be important? Yeah, there's no way you could say that it can't disable the Berserker armor's ability to force Guts to keep fighting. Even without it, though, he would still win, as Aether would allow Ike to keep healing off damage Guts deals, and eventually Guts would just fall. While this is arguably one of the 3 most one-sided fights on this list, only being beaten out by Noelle versus Aegis and Hibiki versus Issei, I still find the thematics and the potential great banter of it, as well as the animation and music potential that the episode could have, to be too good to pass up on. But given that this was one of the shorter entries on the list, let's keep this train rolling with another sword fight of anime and video gaming. Number 4. I'm recording this before Lex Luthor vs. Dr. Doom comes out, so the episode might turn out good, but god damn am I disappointed. While the match has its own merits, I was honestly really looking forward to the idea of Dr. Doom vs. Gilgamesh, partially because I really want a Fate character in Death Battle. But while Gilgamesh is still certainly a possibility against someone else, I think I want to talk about a different Fate character today, Saber. More specifically, the Artoria Pendragon version of Saber. But it's time to find an opponent for her in Death Battle, so let's do that. Urza vs. Saber. Fairy Tail vs. Fate. This is a match that works if you look into the connections, and I'm honestly not a huge fan of Saber's other options anyways. Raphtalia from Shield Hero could work connections-wise, but it's a confusing mess of a matchup where just using the anime versions of both is a stomp for Saber, but using composite for both lets Raphtalia stomp, so I think I'll pass. Lucina is kind of bland connections-wise, is a huge stomp, and there are millions better options for Lucina, including other Fate characters. Luke from Star Wars is probably the most popular one I've seen, but if I'm being genuinely honest, I've never understood that matchup. Urza vs. Saber has actually really good connections, and I'm surprised not as many people are on board with it, especially considering most people seem to want Urza vs. Iron Man, which is shit. But let's just get right into this. Starting with Urza, I'm not going to go into her backstory because she was already covered in Death Battle before, and this segment is going to be pretty long anyways, so I'm just going to be quick about it. To be quick, she was born 400 years prior to the events of Fairy Tail, was abandoned by her mother, the village she lived in was attacked and she was captured, she learned to use magic, escaped, joined the Fairy Tail Guild, and now she's super deadly. There, I did it. Urza's main magic is Requip magic, which basically means she's a walking closet. She can wield swords, lances, axes, hammers, and plenty of other weapons in battle. Her main way of using her magic, however, allows her to change her armor at will, most of which have different properties. Her base form is the Heart Crew's armor, which basically just acts as regular armor. It protects her and does all that other shit that normal armor would be expected to do. In terms of her unique armor, first is the Heaven's Wheel armor. With this armor, she's granted limited flight, the ability to dual-wield swords, and she's able to fire a volley of up to 200 swords at a time. If she wants flight, however, she can just equip the Blackwing armor or the Flame Empress armor for flight, with the latter of which allowing her to fire off blasts of fire. With the Giant armor, she equips a Giant Lance, and her physical strength is increased. For defense, she has the Adamantine armor, which increases her durability and grants her a shield to help with blocking attacks. The Purgatory armor is spiky and comes with a mace, but it's never been seen what it actually does. Lightning armor comes with a spear and can be used for electric blasts, while the Flight armor comes with either a one-handed sword or a knife, and grants immense speed. The Robe of Yoon, which I'm hoping I pronounced right, has elastic properties and comes equipped with a Basento, which is sort of like a combo of Brand of Scimitar. The Morning Star armor lets her fire a blinding light and comes equipped with dual swords that can fire energy blasts. Piercing armor just comes equipped with a jousting lance. The Ataraxia armor comes with wings that double as controllable swords that can be used for shielding or attacking. And then finally, we should go over her 3 best armor sets. First is the Armadura Fairy armor, which is very pink. The armor enhances Urza's attacks with magic and has the added benefit of being extra effective against draconic foes. Next is the Clearheart clothing, which decreases Urza's defense but doubles her speed and strength. Finally is what's considered her best armor, the Nakajami Armor. I think that's how it's pronounced, I don't know. Which comes equipped with the Halberd. The Halberd is an incredible sword capable of cutting through space and time, but comes at the cost of consuming immense amounts of magic, which Urza needs to keep using her equip ability. Thankfully, Urza's stats are pretty easy to determine, as we already know her strength and speed through Gray vs. Esdeath. They determined in that episode that most fairy tale characters scale to Natsu dodging lightning, which has been determined to be over 1,000 times the speed of sound. They also determined her strength from destroying a giant meteor and calculated to be about 56 teratons of TNT. As for durability, I had to do that one myself, so let's look at Urza surviving an explosion. By comparing Urza's height to a structure nearby and then comparing the size of said structure to the size of the explosion, it comes out to about 4.5 gigatons of TNT. Given that Urza was in the Clearheart clothing armor, which cuts her defense in half, this would definitely put her at 8 gigatons of TNT at the bare minimum, which is small island level. On to Saber, she's both more and less complicated. She's less complicated in the sense that she has far less abilities than Urza, but more complicated in the sense that she's from Fate, which I can even confirm is correctly known for being complicated as fuck. First, I need to clarify a few things, though. The Saber I'm going to be using is Artoria Pendragon, and I'll mostly be focusing on her time as Shiro's servant, as well as giving a decent focus to the Fate Stay Night trilogy, which means Fate Zero, Fate Stay Night, and Fate Hollow Ataraxia will be the primary sources. Other media like Unlimited Blade Works and Grand Order can be used as supporting evidence, but won't be the primary focus. Starting with her primary weapon, she wields the Holy Blade Excalibur, and is proficient at using numerous sword fighting styles for it, though she seems to be most proficient in Kendo. Thanks to some events in the past, she also stopped aging, leaving her with the physicality of a 15-year-old girl. She can also disguise her sword with a trick called Invisible Air, or fire blasts of invisible air. Can even fire a massive beam of light up to 3 times, each of which is powerful enough to destroy an entire island. For defense, she has Avalon, which kinda makes Saber invulnerable, but not in the way you might think. While it possesses a physical appearance, it's actually just an illusion of a shield, as it temporarily transports Saber to an alternate dimension to think of strategies or heal any wounds, including major ones which she can heal up in just an hour. She also possesses Instinct, which is basically like the Spider Sense, as it shows if she's about to get hit by a fatal blow. Okay, so maybe it's not, but you know what I mean. She can run on walls, use Mana Boost to give herself a slight stat increase, and she has a near immunity to magic attacks. And then there's her deadlier form, Saber Alter. This form drastically increases her attack and defense, but also halves her speed. Granted, she's still absurdly fast regardless, as in her base form she could react to an attack that happened instantly, making her 10,000 times faster than light speed, or MFTL+. Even as Saber Alter, she would still be sitting in that range at about 5,000 times the speed of light, which is just ridiculous. Back to Saber Alter, this form could match Emiya Alter, who could absolutely obliterate a meteor the size of Shinjuku. Based on the size of Shinjuku, the likely steel composition of the meteor, and assuming vaporization, this would be about 72 petatons of TNT. Hell, Base Saber could withstand a planet-destroying attack from Gilgamesh, and we've already talked about how powerful that would be. This actually leads to quite an interesting case in terms of the battle, as Urza is about on par with Saber in strength, and has a huge edge in versatility. However, between Avalon and Instinct alone, it would be hard for Urza to even land a hit. Throw in Saber's insane speed advantage of being over 8 million times faster, and landing a hit basically becomes impossible. Even if Urza could though, she has no way to finish Saber off. Not only is Saber far too durable, but her near magic immunity is a huge problem for Urza. Honestly, all Urza can really do against Saber is just stall, and if Saber brings out Saber Alter, Urza just stands no chance. And this is ignoring that if I used Grand Order as the primary source for Saber, she would probably be around Multiversal, which would just be overkill. As one-sided as this is, though, I still have a personal attachment to this match, which I might as well share because I want to stall at time and all that shit. For anyone who doesn't know, I write my own fan-made death battle scripts, and I'm currently in the middle of writing my second season right now. So far I've done scripts for Genji vs. Cameron Watanabe, Harry Potter vs. Edward Elric, Shovel Knight vs. Shantae, Weiss vs. Elsa, King K. Rool vs. Gruntilda, Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen before Death Battle got to it, Mega Man X vs. Samus, Cole McGrath vs. Alex Mercer, Sash Lilac vs. Jake Long, Gengar vs. King Boo, Jason Voorhees vs. Michael Myers, Akame vs. Ryuko, Sombra vs. Spy, Shulk vs. Trunks, Red vs. Ash, Gajeel vs. Colossus, Banjo and Kazooie vs. Yuka and Laylee, Biki vs. Issei, Soldier vs. Sarge, Goku Black vs. Reverse Flash, Spinal vs. Cervantes, and I'm currently working on Ruby vs. Maka. If you want to check them out, there will be a link in the description to both my own personal script server, as well as a general death battle server where I also post the scripts. I recommend the latter of which because that's more fun to be in. Self-promotion aside, the first script I ever wrote and the first one I ever redid was Urza vs. Saber. As a result, it holds a special place in my heart, and that's honestly why I like it so much despite Saber shit-stomping. But I think I've had enough of matches containing anime for a while, so how about we focus on video games some more? Number 3. Killer Instinct has had quite a few forays into death battle over the years, appearing in every season except for 3, 5, and 6. It's also probably safe to say that we'll continue to see the franchise for a while, as there are plenty more popular matchups remaining. While most people will point to Liu Kang vs. Jago as the next option, I personally have my own preference to see Spinal in death battle. Being such a fascinating character, he certainly deserves a fascinating opponent, so let's see if we can find one that fits that nature. Spinal vs. Cervantes, Killer Instinct vs. Soul Calibur. This is probably Spinal's only good match, both in fairness and thematics. Cruel from Vainglory is an okay idea, I guess, but I honestly don't care about the franchise, and the thematics are still meh at best. Scorpion from Mortal Kombat works well having a thematic sense to it, and you could maybe argue it to be fair, but if Scorpion returns, he's much better off either having a rematch against Ryu or fighting Kurapika from Hunter x Hunter. Then there's Sir Daniel from Medieval, which is a matchup I've seen a lot of requests for, which I personally find strange as there's not much that makes it worth happening. In terms of thematics, all there really is undead skeletal warriors with similar primary weapons, which is pretty mediocre compared to other options for both. In terms of fairness, Spinal shit stomps Dan without much effort. Potential-wise, the animation would probably be decent, but the choreography, music, and especially banter just don't feel like they would be that great in all honesty. Also, this gives me another chance to bring up that Dan's best opponent is Chop Chop from Skylanders, and I just find that fucking hilarious. Spinal vs. Cervantes isn't just fair, but has great potential, and the connections work both on the surface level and when you look deeper. Both were once forms of thieves, with Spinal being a bandit and Cervantes being a pirate. Eventually they had a chance encounter with an ancient artifact that would lead to their death, but instead cursed them with immortality, Spinal with an evil mask that took control of his will, and Cervantes being possessed by Soul Edge. Both eventually became undead pirates in search of said artifact for reasons that are polar opposites, with Spinal wanting to destroy the mask so he could end his immortality and finally die for good, and Cervantes wanting to claim the power of Soul Edge for himself. Hell, I could go further than that with the connections, but this video is already long enough, so let's not waste any more time and just get right into it with Spinal. As mentioned already, Spinal was originally a bandit hired by Khan Ra to steal from an ancient king. Shit went down, Spinal got captured and tortured, and the king forced an ancient mask onto Spinal that took away his free will. Eventually, Spinal was burned alive, but still lived, and then became an undead pirate searching for said mask with quite the arsenal to boot to do so. His primary weapon is nothing more than just a standard cutlass that he's pretty damn proficient with. But for extra literal firepower, Spinal can somehow just ignite his sword on fire. It's pretty random as none of his other moves involve fire, but it looks cool. As for shields, he's wielded numerous equipable options, but I'll primarily be sticking with the Kraken shield as it's what's seen in pretty much all official art of him. While it might look like a flimsy wooden shield, there's far more to it than that. It's enhanced with magic which lets it absorb energy-based projectiles like Ness's PSI Magnet in Smash. Being that Spinal is supernatural, he also has access to numerous magic attacks. With Power Devour, he can absorb energy projectiles to fuel his own magic and block physical attacks. He can teleport with the aptly named Skeleport, which is immediately the best attack to ever exist just for that pun alone. Being a skeleton, he also legally has to attack with bones, and he can do just that. He can fire out basic skull projectiles or ones that drain an opponent's health, which he can also do by summoning a skeletal hand, which can even just hold them in place. Speaking of summoning, he can summon the undead to fight alongside him, which might not sound very fair, but he's a pirate, so I don't think he cares about fairness. Finally, if his back is against the wall, he can activate his Agent of Chaos mode, which enhances his strength to the point of being able to match Tusk summoning a meteor, which Death Battle themselves determined in John Talbane vs. Saber Wolf would require outputting energy equivalent to 1.5 kilotons of TNT. What makes this even more scary is that Spinal's speed is great for capitalizing on that strength. Spinal has canonically defeated Saber Wolf, who could keep up with Glacius. Glacius was able to get the drop on Ultratech's AI Arya and proved to be faster than she could react, and Arya could react within a nanosecond. This should put Spinal comfortably around the speed of light and possibly higher than that. As for Cervantes, after he found Soul Edge, he went missing for 20 years, and when people saw him again, he was more than just an undead pirate. He was the Dread Pirate, with the arsenal to strike fear into people. Cervantes is an expert in numerous martial arts, though there are 3 he seems to specialize in. Arnis is a traditionally Philippine style that focuses on weaponry, footwork, and defensive maneuvers. Savate is a French style that focuses heavily on boxing, and then there's his favorite style, Niten Ichiryu. This traditionally Japanese style focuses on heavily wielding dual swords, which is perfect given Cervantes' primary weaponry is dual swords. While he's had access to many throughout the course of the Soul Calibur series, his current canonical outings have him wielding Nirvana and Acheron. Acheron is nothing special, just a typical longsword, but Nirvana is where his real specialty lies. Instead of being an ordinary blade, the hilt has a pistol attached to it that never needs to reload and can be powered up by charging up the blasts. He also appears to have some limited telekinesis, though it's likely it's just through some special link with the blades as he only uses it on them, but it does mean he can control them without his hands, which is pretty useful. He also possesses a teleport, though he's limited to only teleporting backwards or up. Finally are his 2 strongest hitting attacks, the Geostellar and Dread Slash. Both are powerful enough to one-shot a target, but there's a catch. They're slow as hell. Luckily, Cervantes can circumvent the speed of the Geostellar, at least, by performing the much faster instant Geostellar. Cervantes is known in-game for being a rushdown character that focuses heavily on hard hitting, and that's kind of accurate to how he's portrayed canonically. The correct part is how he's hard hitting in nature, as he scales to this storm being created, which has been calculated to be around 3.5 megatons of TNT. And you could argue scaling him even higher than that possibly thanks to Soul Edge. Speed-wise though, he's at best Mach 5 through scaling to Ivy kicking a point-blank bullet. While some characters do get lightning timing thanks to Siegfried's lightning, Cervantes is never shown to be on the same level as Siegfried, so it's unlikely he could scale. With all that taken into account, this does seem like a matchup that could go either way, as Spinal absolutely blitzes Cervantes, but Cervantes in turn AP stomps. Comparing their speeds, Spinal is over 215,000 times faster, but AP-wise, Cervantes is over 2,000 times stronger. Spinal's superior arsenal is almost enough to let him take the win, but there's one more factor we have to look at. I mentioned in the connections that both are immortal, so the question is if either can circumvent the other's immortality. Spinal may be fast, but he has no way around Cervantes' immortality, as he would have to not only figure out that he has to destroy Soul Edge to do that, but actually do that. I need to remind you all probably that Soul Edge is currently with Nightmare, who would effortlessly wipe the floor with Spinal. Cervantes actually can get around Spinal's immortality as he has one final trick up his sleeve. He can absorb souls, and if he absorbs Spinal's soul, that's basically it. I do want to bring up first that you could maybe make arguments for scaling Spinal to the current moon level Killer Instinct, as there is that through Gargos, who Spinal has potentially defeated in canon. But even if you were to make an argument for that, by that logic, you could also argue scaling Cervantes to Nightmare having moon level feats as well, because both have wielded Soul Edge. So at the end of the day, Cervantes' strength would allow him to find the opening he needs to absorb Spinal's soul, just then ending the battle and securing himself a victory. But with all that said, I don't have a clever transition, so let's just move on to number 2 since we're almost done. Number 2. I'm not even going to beat around the bush or come up with anything clever here. I really want Banjo and Kazooie in Death Battle. I love the design of them, I love their games, except for Nuts and Bolts, but we don't talk about that one. And anyways, you already know who they're going to be fighting, so let's just get right into it, I guess. Banjo and Kazooie versus Yuka and Laylee. This is literally the only good matchup for either, and you cannot make a case that that's wrong. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, and Sonic and Tails were all just spot fillers, if I'm being honest. These two have so much more in common than just being animal duos. Both are 3D platforming duos consisting of a grounded character and a female partner that allows for flight. Both duos have similar personality dynamics as well. Banjo and Yuka are both lazy but also determined, while Kazooie and Laylee are often both snarky in contrast to this, making backhanded comments a lot of the time. Both go on a quest to collect treasure in the Jiggies and Pages. Both stop an evil corporate head. Hell, Yuka and Laylee are even spiritual successors to Banjo and Kazooie. Starting off with Banjo and Kazooie, they have quite the large arsenal. Obviously they have the standard attacks you'd expect, such as claw swipes, pecking, and flight. But outside of that type of stuff, they have a pretty odd arsenal. Sure, there are some Looney Tunes-esque attacks, such as Kazooie being able to drill through stone or Banjo slamming her onto the ground, but it gets far weirder than that. They're incredibly versatile in using numerous types of eggs as weapons, each of which have various special abilities. The first type are just standard blue eggs, which are nothing special. The most notable thing about them is that they have the most ammo with a max capacity of 100 eggs. The next type are red fire eggs, which only have half the ammo of blue eggs, but can set the target on fire. Grenade eggs look and function exactly like actual grenades, though they only have an ammo count of 25. Cyan ice eggs have an ammo count of 50, but unlike fire eggs, they freeze the target. Clockwork Kazooie eggs spawn remote-controlled explosives, and proximity eggs act as proximity-based explosives, with both only having an ammo count of 10. Finally, battery eggs have an ammo count of 15 and can shock opponents. Then there's their most powerful attack, Wonder Wing, which is an invulnerable tackle, most useful for powering through an enemy's most powerful attacks. Even without it though, they've powered through some really powerful attacks, including Gruntilda's strongest spells. Gauging the full power of Gruntilda can be a bit complicated, but I think I have a good estimation of her power, so I'll do my best to explain it. In Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, it's flat out confirmed that Gruntilda has enough power to destroy all of Spiral Mountain, and when I say this, I'm referring to the entire map, and not just the mountain itself. Keep in mind as well, Nuts and Bolts has flat out been confirmed that it's canon, unfortunately. Calculating this was a bit difficult, so I used a bit of an unorthodox process that probably makes this a bit inaccurate, but I did the best I could. First, I used Banjo and Kazooie's canon height of 155 centimeters to determine the height of their house to be 305 centimeters. By comparing that to the height and radius of the mountain itself, I was able to determine it to have a volume of over 8 billion centimeters cubed. Assuming destruction through vaporization, destroying just the mountain itself is equivalent to 50 kilotons of TNT. After that, I was able to figure out how many of the mountain it would take to fill up the entire map, which is about 43. And assuming that, the total destructive energy needed to destroy the Olive Spiral Mountain comes out to about 2 megatons of TNT, or small city level. While they don't scale to this in AP, they do scale in durability, and they aren't even that bad in terms of AP. They've outpowered the Hag 1, which caused a magnitude 5 earthquake, which is equivalent to 476 tons of TNT, and they're fast enough to dodge meteors moving at Mach 5 speeds. As for Yuka and Laylee, they also have quite the interesting arsenal. Obviously, they have standard attacks you'd expect, such as attacking with their tail, tongue, claws, and even having access to flight. But just like Banjo and Kazooie, they have some really strange moves in their arsenal. Like most chameleons, Yuka can grab things with his tongue and also possesses camouflage. But while it's inaccurate to how camouflage actually works, I'm not going to spend a shit ton of time getting into that. What is good to note is that instead of being color change, Yuka actually just becomes light refractive. So it's more along the lines of him and Laylee becoming completely invisible than just blending in with their background. His true greatest ability though is through his tongue, which can help with eating butterflies to restore health, or even better, eating berries that grant elemental abilities. Orange scorch berries are the first ones and allow the user to breathe fire. Blue splash berries allow the user to spit blasts of water. Frost berries can be used to freeze the target. Bomb berries can be used to spit grenades. Somehow. That's basically it. The main drawback, though, is that these abilities only last for 20 seconds at a time. Luckily, Laylee can help out too through contributing with sonic attacks. She can stun opponents with Sonar Shot or unleash a weaker AoE version of the attack with Sonar Explosion. As for defensive options, she can use Sonar Shield to, well, create a shield. They're somewhat decently strong, able to break off a piece of gold, which would require a force equivalent to 111 megajoules of TNT. But their best stats lie in their defensive areas. In terms of durability, they survived this massive explosion, which, despite looking like it would probably be planetary, actually isn't. It's just a machine, in fact. But it's still impressive. Calculating this is a bit difficult, as Yuka and Laylee don't have an official cannon height, but we can scale them to the height of Shovel Knight. Doing this, we can find Yuka and Laylee together reach a height of 1.36 meters, and comparing this to the radius of the sphere, we can find a volume of 252 million centimeters cubed, which gives an explosive yield of 15 kilotons of TNT. Not quite planet level, but still town level, which is definitely impressive. Most impressively, though, is they can dodge this laser, which, given that it burns on contact, travels in a straight line, and moves at a consistent speed, should put them at bare minimum, light speed. Hoping now you can see even more as to why I love this matchup so much. It's an incredibly fascinating one to look at, and given the massive speed difference of Yuka and Laylee being over 1 million times faster, it almost seems like a win for Yuka and Laylee, with them probably taking about 49% of the victories. Looking at the other stats though, Banjo and Kazooie are not only leagues stronger and tougher, but surprisingly they have a perfect arsenal to grant them the win. Comparing the eggs and berries, the eggs grant far more versatility. Both had fire, ice, and explosive variants and a unique property, but electricity is far more useful than water. Sonic attacks seem like a good option on paper, but Wonder Wing's invulnerability allows them to completely negate the stunning properties of it. Invisibility and speed definitely seems like a good combination, and it is definitely one. But it can be negated by Clockwork Kazooie eggs chasing them down, and proximity eggs limiting their mobility. While Yuka and Laylee's speed is far superior to Banjo and Kazooie's, all it does is prove to be just a mere annoyance against Banjo and Kazooie's strength, durability, and vastly better arsenal, giving the Baron Bird duo the win. However, before we move on to number 1, I'd like to go over some honorable mentions that just failed to make this list. Knack vs. Nariko. I genuinely think this is the best option for both, as it's fairly thematic and has solid potential. But if I'm being honest, I think most of my love for it is Knack being a fucking meme. Riptor vs. SCP-939. This is honestly my favorite Riptor matchup and my favorite SCP matchup, but Spinal vs. Cervantes already took the Killer Instinct spot. Princess Celestia vs. Amaterasu. Thank Adam for me not including this one on the list. I love this match so much, but Adam has made My Little Pony so fucking confusing in versus debating that I had to cut it. It'll get a spot on the list once I decide if Celestia is universal or multiversal. Mandalorian vs. Goblin Slayer. An amazing option and the best choice for both, but I haven't finished Goblin Slayer yet, so I couldn't put it on the list in good faith. Jason Voorhees vs. Michael Myers. I always want to put this one on the list, but it's held back by me being nervous that they'll fuck it up in live action. Otherwise, I'd want this enough to be on the list. Travis Touchdown vs. Jack Caiman. This one's grown on me a lot in the past year, but it didn't grow on me until way too recently, so I couldn't put it on the list. Scarecrow vs. Mysterio. My favorite match for both, with plenty of good potential, especially in the animation, but there's one problem. Diva vs. Penny Parker and Toph vs. Terra already took up the Marvel and DC slots on the list. Agent Venom vs. Senator Armstrong. Literally the same problem as Scarecrow vs. Mysterio, but without DC. King K. Rool vs. Gruntilda. As big of a stomp as this is, there is way too much comedy for potential in this one for me to not love it. It's just too bad that I prefer Banjo and Kazooie vs. Yuka and Laylee over it for the Banjo-Kazooie match. Sakia Mamiya vs. Yeager. This is a super underestimated matchup that I would have loved to include, but Cyber's 4D Aaron has made me kind of nervous. In all seriousness, though, I just really need to finish Sin and Punishment and Attack on Titan before I can put it on a list. Zagreus vs. the Beheaded. A really awesome match that suffers from me being too bad at video games to touch either Hades or Dead Cells right now. Also, I can't find any Zagreus stats yet. Gajiel vs. Colossus. It was tough to put Urza vs. Saber on the list instead of this, but I just have more of an attachment to Urza vs. Saber. Otherwise, this might have actually made the list. Kasumi vs. Lucina. Honestly, my favorite match for both, but it mostly came into existence because Kasumi is one of my favorite characters in fiction and my favorite Persona character. Also, Ike vs. Guts and Noelle vs. Aegis took the Fire Emblem and Persona spots. Makoto Nijima vs. Tifa Lockhart. Same as Kasumi vs. Lucina, but minus the Fire Emblem. Soldier vs. Sarge. I love this one, but I honestly don't know why I just couldn't bring myself to put it on the list. I just couldn't. Misaka Makoto vs. Static. Same thing as with Soldier vs. Sarge, but this time the problem is that I just prefer Toph vs. Terra as a DC matchup. Cat vs. Ochako Uraraka. Literally the exact same thing I said about Soldier vs. Sarge. I love it, but I have no clue why I couldn't put it on the list. I just couldn't. Ben 10 vs. Geostellar. I love this match, but Ben being in it means that I am not touching it with a 500-foot pole, because, oh god. Kintaro vs. Tai Lung. Watching Biffweed has made me actually really want to see the Funny Leopard Man in Death Battle, and I hate Kintaro vs. Incineroar, so this works out, but it's mostly just there because memes and I don't like Kintaro vs. Incineroar. Aloy vs. Link. This might have made the list, but right now I'm just waiting to see if Horizon Forbidden West buffs Aloy enough or not. Dan Hibiki vs. Glass Joe. I really only love this matchup for the fact that it has numerous memes and is hilarious. And honestly, I don't know if that really qualifies it for being on a top 10 list. Shulk vs. Trunks. Same thing as Ben vs. Geo, but replace Ben with Dragon Ball fans. Little Mac vs. Makunouchi Ippo. I don't know shit about Ippo, hell I don't even know if I'm pronouncing him right, but the match seems pretty damn fun. Sombra vs. Spy. A really fun idea, but Diva vs. Penny already took up the Overwatch spot. Cassie Cage vs. Damian Wayne. Literally any role Damian could have filled was already filled by Toph vs. Terra. Otherwise, it might have actually made the list. Nemesis vs. Pyramid Head. I don't know much about Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but this could make for a really awesome horror-themed matchup. And finally, the last one, Harry Potter vs. Edward Elric. I saved this one for last because I really do like it a lot. I honestly do want to put this on the list, but Neo vs. Kirito just managed to beat it out for a spot. If I could have had a number 11, this one would have definitely taken that. But anyways, I think that's enough of that. I think it's finally time to move on to number 1. Number 1. Shovel Knight vs. Shantae. This is a match that feels special to me in so many ways because I've wanted it for so long. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of both franchises, but it goes so much further than that. I've wanted this since before Scrooge vs. Shovel Knight happened, and I've gone through a lot of being told that this won't happen, and other matchups for these two.
first was Scrooge vs. Shovel Knight happening, and I might have been fine with it happening had they actually treated Shovel Knight with respect. Eventually I joined the Death Battle Discord, where I found that the more popular match was against Sash Lilac. Hell, it got to the point where I got excited when it was announced as a DBX. A fucking DBX, which I would normally just say meh to. This is a match I really want, and with that cleared up, I just want to get into the characters themselves. Starting with Shovel Knight, he wields the Shovel Blade, which is a surprisingly versatile weapon. It can launch a mini shockwave on the ground when at full health, charge up a powerful slash, kill enemies from above with the shovel drop, and even reflect most projectiles. To aid him in battle even more, he also has numerous relics he can use, and yes, I'm going to list them all to be as thorough as possible. With the Flare Rod, he can shoot fireballs. With the Phase Locket, he can turn intangible. With the Dust Knuckles, he can tunnel through stone and dirt with ease. The Throwing Anchor is a heavy projectile that is thrown in an arc. The Alchemy Coin can turn weak enemies into money. The Mobile Gear lets Shovel Knight traverse over spikes and pits without fear. The Warhorn can clear the screen of any weak enemies, but not strong ones like bosses. The Propeller Dagger lets him fly through the air horizontally. The Chaos Sphere can bounce on walls and hit any enemy. And then there are the two Truffle Chalices. While he has 3 different possible Icors he can carry, only 2 are particularly useful in battle. First is the Icor of Boldness. This grants him another method of invulnerability, granting him 10 seconds of it. His most useful, however, is the Icor of Renewal, which fully refills his health and magic, but both of these only have 1 use each, making them limited. Also, while all of his relics are incredibly useful, they're limited to how much magic he has, which, factoring the 1 refill he gets from the Icor of Renewal, would mean he can use up to 200 magic before running out for good. On the note of Arsenal, I'm not going to bring up any of Shovel Knight's equipable armors, since he can't equip them mid-battle. However, his standard armor is incredibly durable, able to survive if being sucked into a vortex. As usual, Phantom Falcon did the calc, and got it to around 9 gigatons of TNT. While there are possible arguments for Shovel Knight getting higher, such as the Tower of Fate collapsing or the storm that blocks paths, there are issues with both of these. Regarding the Tower of Fate, it's debatable if it's applicable to Shovel Knight, as he was unconscious and carried out of the tower before it collapsed. As for the storm, props to Gumball Viking for bringing this up to me over a year ago, so I'm just going to directly quote what he told me in DMs. To quote Gumball himself, Nintendo and many others believe the Enchantress is responsible for it, and would make Shovel Knight city to island through scaling. However, I personally have a couple of flaws with it. For one thing, there's no evidence in blocked off levels that a storm ever took place, nor do any of the NPCs ever say that the Enchantress has such powers. However, we do know she's responsible for the storm in the Tower of Fate area. Also, if it was the Enchantress, why was it in King Knight's journey before she even took power? Once again, thanks to Gumball for bringing this up to my attention. Even with armor that hefty though, he's quick enough to dodge lightning from the Baz, putting him about 400 times the speed of sound. He's also technically got light speed arguments, but I'm a bit iffy on them, so I'm just gonna ignore them for now. This isn't to say Shantae can't hold her own though, because ooh boy did 7 Sirens give her quite the extensive arsenal. Just like with Shovel Knight, I'll be going over her entire arsenal, but ignoring the special clothing from Half Genie Hero. Right off the bat, I should probably cover her most iconic ability, her hair whip. Somehow she can use her ponytail as a whip, but given that she does this in Risky's Revenge, it's unlikely that it's any form of magic, but rather just something she's physically capable of. Speaking of magic, her most iconic magic is her ability to transform or teleport by belly dancing. And over the years, she's gained numerous transformations, some more useful than others. With the monkey form, she can move faster and climb on walls. With the elephant, she can barrel through stone with ease. As a spider, she can cling to ceilings and spit projectiles that poison the target. As a harpy, she can fly and shoot feather projectiles. And the Tinkerbat comes equipped with the elements of the first 3, while also coming equipped with a cutlass. With the mermaid transformation, she can swim, dive underwater, and shoot water bubbles strong enough to break stone. As a crab, she gains pincer abilities and can hide in her shell to be completely invulnerable. As a bat, she can fly and see in the dark. The mouse grants her access to incredibly small passageways and also gives me a severe case of PTSD of Shido's palace from Persona 5. As the Dryad, she becomes completely invulnerable but can't move or attack, and the Gem Jug does the same thing. The Dash Newt grants her incredible air mobility, the Gastro Drill lets her tunnel through terrain, the Bonker Tortoise grants Shantae a spin attack, The Sea Frog can swim incredibly fast, and the Jet Octo grants her up to 3 jumps. Then she has a few more absurd transformations, such as the Sophia 3, which doubles her movement speed and lets her fire high-powered energy blasts, because it transforms her into a literal tank. As well as that, she gained a new type of transformation in 7 Sirens known as the Fusion Dances, of which she has 4. The Seer Dance lets her see invisible platforms and enemies. The Refresh Dance fully heals her and can be used repeatedly. The Spark Dance lets her fire a barrage of electricity, and the Quake Dance can create an earthquake which covers the entire screen. She also possesses a large variety of weapons and spells that she can use. Most notable, she can heal herself at any time thanks to having collected all 12 Fireflies. However, she has plenty more than just a healing spell. She can revive herself to full health with the Auto Potion, increase her strength with the Super Monster Milk, form a barrier to start projectiles with the Bubble Shield, summon 3 bladed balls to orbit around her with the Super Pike Ball, shoot people with the Flintlock Pistol, glide through the air with the Pirate Hat, slash at foes with the Scimitar, fire cannonballs directly below her with the cannon, become invisible with Vanish Cream, refill her magic meter up to 3 times with the Magic Vial, launch 3 fireballs with the Spitfire, unleash a torrent of flames with the Flamethrower, summon storm clouds at the opponent with the Storm Puff, summon mines into the air with the Mega Puff, constantly refill her magic meter an unlimited amount of times automatically with the Magic Fill, dodge attacks with the Backdash, reduce the amount of magic she needs to use up with the Magic Bracelet, reflect projectiles with the Mirror, fire rockets with the, well, Rocket, and become completely invulnerable with the Invincibility. Then there's the newest addition in 7 Sirens, the Monster Cards, which there are a lot of. Since there are over 100 of these, I'm just going to go over ones that would be applicable in numerous scenarios. She has numerous cards that can be used to power up different spells and weapons or reduce the cost of them. She can increase her strength with the Water Lily card. With the Coral Siren, she'll gain back 1 MP of magic for every second. And with the Empress, she can reduce the amount of damage enemies deal to her. Might not sound like much, but most cards are all in the first grouping. While she might not look like it, Shantae is incredibly quick, able to dodge lightning from Giga Mermaid, which would require her to react nearly 300 times the speed of sound. She's also tough enough to survive this ship exploding, which in my attempts at calculating came out to nearly 4 gigatons of TNT. It's possible to get her higher through a statement of the island in 7 Sirens exploding, but it never actually does explode, so I'm just gonna ignore that for now. With all this considered, Shovel Knight does have the slightest of edges in stats, being 2 times tougher and 1.3 times faster. But even with that, I think the stats are close enough for Shantae to take it. Simply put, she's far more versatile and can counter anything Shovel Knight does. She has numerous regeneration and invulnerability methods to outdo Shovel Knight's Icors. She can reduce the Flare Rod or she can reflect the Flare Rod or just counter its fire with her own. The Elephant should be able to match the Dust Knuckles. She can easily stall out the Phase Locket with Flight. The Throwing Anchor is far too slow to reliably hit her. The Alchemy Coin only works on weak enemies, and the same goes for the Warhorn. The Propeller Dagger and Mobile Gear could be countered by the Sophia 3. She could reflect the Chaos Sphere and stall out his magic with her Self-Sustain. And then there's one more spell that I haven't mentioned that would easily let her finish him off. Obliterate. This spell creates a powerful explosion so strong it can do severe damage to bosses. It would certainly be a close fight with Shovel Knight having plenty of good arguments for winning, but I ultimately feel that Shantae's absurd versatility would be way too much for Shovel Knight to handle. Well, that should do it for this list. I put this off for a while, but I'm glad I finally got it done and over with. Obviously not every match on this list will happen, but hey, I can dream at least, right? Now that my list is done, I'd love to hear what yours are in the comments section. Now, normally I'd end the video here, but I have some stuff to say. First, thank you so much to Phantom Falcon, Gumball Viking, Psychic, and Party Time for helping me out with this. If any of you guys are watching this, I don't care if you helped indirectly or directly, I still want to give a huge thanks. Any of them that I asked for their channels for will have a link in the description, which I believe is only Psychic. More importantly, I don't want to sound too sappy or emotional or whatever, but I can't express enough how grateful I am for how this channel has performed over the past 7 months. When I returned to making YouTube videos with my Zuko vs. Todoroki prediction, I was sitting at 45 subscribers, and 7 months later I'm at nearly 300. That might not sound like a lot, but as someone who only does this for fun, this still means the world to me. I want to thank you all so much for the support you guys have given me, and who knows, maybe next year we'll hit 1,000 subs. Anyways, that's all I have to say, so thanks for watching. I'll be releasing 2 new tracks soon, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next live stream I do. Take care.